Hey folks, since South Africa is once again in international news, what with the first delegation of Afrikaner refugees relocating to the United States under Donald Trump's executive order with regard to the relocation of what his administration classes as an oppressed minority, I unfortunately need to once again explain why refugee status is not something that I can pursue. I know because I have many American friends, several of whom actually support me financially and keep me afloat over here in South Africa, that lots of Americans for years now, well before Trump's executive order about Afrikaner refugees, have wanted me to leave South Africa and move to the States. So, once again, I must explain to you why, in my case, that's simply not possible, even with the existence of refugee status for Afrikaners. I have spoken about this previously, so if you've seen my previous coverage of this and you feel I'm repeating myself, I apologize, but this comes up every time South Africa is mentioned in news in the US and elsewhere. So I need to address it again. As a quadriplegic, I cannot feasibly move to another country. And refugee status is a lot more complicated to claim than you might think, particularly as a South African. If I were to claim refugee status in the United States, I have to be able to provide direct, substantive proof that I personally am being oppressed on the basis of my race. And if I'm being entirely honest, I can't provide that kind of evidence on paper because the social situation here in South Africa is more nuanced than simply being able to, ironically enough, describe things in black and white terms. I cannot provide direct evidence that my race has been a factor in me being unable to gain stable employment. I cannot claim that I have been formally oppressed by the government any more than any other white person, particularly in terms of black economic empowerment legislation or anything of that nature. And when I've tried previously, and even more recently, to look into the options of relocating to the States, it is very clear that the fact that I'm a quadriplegic and will be until the day I die basically excludes me from ever being successful with that kind of application. But there is a more complex issue here that I need to make clear to you. Even if I were able to secure formal refugee status, and even if I were able to raise the financial means necessary to get over to the States, I would require somebody to take on my physical daily care. I couldn't simply move into some group home because then I would be no better off than I am here. And what you need to understand is that even those of you with the best of intentions who really want me to move to the States because you believe that I would have a better quality of life, without someone who is fully committed to my daily care and someone who I can rely on to meet my needs explicitly and remain committed to doing so for as long as I live, moving across the world is simply not a feasible option. I know that those of you who keep telling me to look into moving do so because you really care about my well being and you can see the direction in which South Africa is headed. But it's more complex than just raising the money and doing the paperwork. My disability adds a whole nother layer of physical complexity that most successful refugees, in fact, I'm fairly willing to bet all of these successful refugees won't have to deal with. Because any administration in America, whether Trump or whoever comes after him, their main aim should be, and it definitely is under Trump, to put America first. That means that if they are going to let foreigners into their borders, those foreigners had better have professional skills that America is in need of. Because of my physical disability, I am not able to work in what I would consider to be useful fields. I am qualified as a journalist, and that is my main professional skill. It is the only field in which I am formally qualified, and quite frankly, that whole industry, the whole industry of journalism, is dying, and it has been dying for years. And now, with the advent of generative AI, it's going to die even more quickly. You just don't need more journalists in the United States. I'm sure that there are plenty of American journalists who are currently out of work right now because there are no jobs for them. So, as much as it would be nice to believe that it was possible for me to move to the States, it's simply not. The reality is that if you want to help me in a tangible way, what you can do is support me via the financial support links that I often share across my social media. And that is the way that you can keep me afloat as best as possible. I know that it is emotionally satisfying to think of saving me from what South Africa is becoming. But real life's not a movie, and I have to live based on the circumstances of my real life. I'm making this as a video to try and address the issue as completely as possible so that I don't have to keep answering questions one by one by one. Because frankly, it's quite draining to explain on an individual basis every time this comes up in the news why I myself can't leave. I hope that you take this in the spirit in which it is intended and that you don't think I'm being hostile, ungrateful, or aggressive. Anyway, that's about all I've got to say about that. Look after yourselves, and as always, farewell.